Hello everybody, this is Paolo Gaudiano. I'm a scientist in residence of light reaction. And today I'm here to talk to you about perceptual science. In fact, what I want to do is I want to tell you about the fact that sometimes what you see is not necessarily what you get. Or more specifically, there are aspects of the way that we perceive things in the world that actually influence what we see that we think is really what's happening in the world, but it's quite different. Even something as simple as black and white, that you would think, oh, of course I can tell black and white. But let me show you an interesting example. If we take a black and white checkerboard, like this one here, everybody would agree that it's got alternating black and white squares. But what I want you to do is to focus for a moment on these two squares labeled A and B. If I were to ask you about it, most of you would say that A is one of the black squares, whereas B is one of the white squares. And you might find it very hard to believe, but actually squares A and B are exactly the same color. And here's how I'm going to prove it to you. If I take a little rectangle and slide it over, you will see very quickly that it's exactly the same color, here all the way to there. But our brains prevent us from perceiving that. Let me show you in a different way. If I take away the rectangle and cover this with a mask, you can see again that A and B are exactly the same color. Now pay attention as I remove the mask and you see the checkerboard again. If you try desperately to convince yourself that those are the same color, it will last for a couple of seconds and then you will no longer be able to tell that they're the same color. Let's try that. See it? By now, probably all of you once again see this as being a lighter color than that one. Now, why is that the case? The reason for that is that our brain has evolved over time to recognize that when shadows or changes in illumination change colors, that does not mean that the object that it's representing is actually changing. It would be devastating if we saw something and thought that it was different just because the lighting changed from indoor lighting to outdoor lighting, or if a cloud suddenly passed over the sun. And our brain has done this amazing thing where it can discount the fact that there is a shadow from the cylinder, and it makes us believe that this is a white square in the shade, and that's a black square in the light, when in reality, the color or the intensity of the light hitting our retina is exactly the same in both cases. Now, let's take that same example and add some color to it, because one of the things that matters a lot to people and to animals is to be able to recognize objects based on their color. Suppose, for example, that you wanted to take a computer to tell me what is the color of the piece of paper. Most of you would agree that this is just a uniform red piece of paper. But if you were to take your computer and measure the colors, what you would find is that there's actually fairly different color up here and down here. So here I'm measuring the RGB coordinates, and you can see that that one is a 143, that one's 215, much brighter red. But our brain, again, perceives it as being a constant color. And the same thing happens in the wall behind it. You can see that the wall is much brighter up here than it is down here. Again, it would be devastating from an evolutionary perspective if we thought that the wall was actually broken up just because there was a shadow across it. During the day, as it turns out, in fact this is something long before indoor lighting existed, there was a need for our brains to evolve this capability to maintain what's known as color constancy, meaning that objects of a given color will look the same even when the daylight colors change dramatically from morning to middle of the day to evening. As you can see, exactly the same panorama as we change through the day. We get very red light over here and much bluer greenish light over there. Why is that important to be able to discount that? Well, because imagine that you're now out in the wilderness and you find some fruit. You find a strawberry or some other fruit that is not ripe. What happens if you hold on to it and then it becomes sunset and you think that it's red? Well, that would not be very good, would it? So let's look at another simple visual illusion that results from the fact that our brain is able to discount the changes in the color of the light as opposed to the intensity of the light as we saw before. So here I'm going to show you again, here's our green and red strawberries. And here are two bright large squares, one red one and one green one. And then what most people see here is a row of green rectangles, a row of red rectangles, and then up here a long row of kind of grayish rectangles. It's kind of hard to tell the color. But it turns out that in fact, you may find it hard to believe, but if I put a mask on it, you will see that these rectangles are exactly the same color as these, and likewise, these rectangles are exactly the same color as those. Let me show you again as we take that light mask and kind of move it up and down. And it's really hard to imagine that those colors look so similar going across the top when they're really quite different. Now, why is our brain doing that? In this case, what seems to be the case is that our brain thinks that that red square represents the fact that there is uniform red light bathing that image. So the squares that were already red appear kind of grayish. Whereas over here on the other side, the brain believes that it acts as if there was a bright green light illuminating the entire scene. And again, it changes the color or the perception of the color. There was something that came out maybe in the beginning of 2015 that created great clamor across the internet, and that was the question of what color is this dress? There was a famous picture of a color that became somewhat of a meme on Twitter, and everybody got into arguments about whether this dress was a white and gold dress or a blue and black dress. And I'm sure that many of you heard about it. Now what's interesting about it is that roughly 50% of the people see the dress as being a white and gold dress that is effectively in the shadow, and therefore it appears darker, whereas some people perceive it as being a blue and black dress that is actually bathed in light, and therefore it looks blanched out like that. And in fact, it turns out that from the point of view of a computer, those two give you exactly the same result. So here is a pattern that is white and gold, on which we superimpose a shadow, and here is a pattern that is blue and black, on which we cast a light, and as you can see, those colors turn out to be exactly the same from here to there. In the previous picture, our brains gets confused because there is no clear indication of where the light is coming from. And there's also no reference point. There is no skin tones or anything like that that can tell us immediately what color that really is. So for some people, that seems like a blue and black dress that is illuminated from the front, whereas for some people, it seems to be a white and gold dress that's illuminated from the background. And we see it as completely different. What does this all have to do with advertising? Given that our brain influences the way that we perceive things based on illumination, based on color, the same can happen when you put an advertisement on a website. Here, for example, is a very simple ad that is very difficult to detect, or somewhat difficult to detect against a white background, but if you put exactly the same ad on a page with a black background, then it jumps out much more quickly. So it's clear that the context of the website in which an advertisement might be appearing, whether it's a display ad or a video ad, is going to influence dramatically the way that we perceive it. But what does this have to do with light reaction? There is a very important question that has been bugging me for a long time that should be of interest to you as well. Why is it that of 100 viewable ads, roughly only one of them is ever seen? And I'm talking about viewable ads where there is an opportunity to see it. So it's a known fact that the typical response rate of, for example, display advertising is in fact less than 1%. But let's say that it's roughly 1%. Why is that the case? Well, we have hypothesized that in order for a viewable ad to lead to a favorable outcome, which is exactly what we're trying to do with light reaction, it needs to cross several stages that have to do with the way that we perceive things. First of all, we have to notice the ad, because if it's off on the side of the screen and we don't even see it, then it doesn't matter how relevant it is, we'll never really see it. And even if we notice it with the corner of our eye, we may not pay attention to it. And it's only after we pay attention that we have an initial gut reaction. And that gut reaction is not about, oh, I like this brand, I don't like this brand. It's really more about, oh, this is annoying, it's getting in my way, it's interfering with what I'm doing. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it's completely neutral. Only at that point will you be able to evaluate whether that ad is relevant to you and whether or not it is a timely ad, because maybe it's a wonderful product that is relevant to you that you just bought 2 days ago. And our claim is that this perceptual pathway explains why so many opportunities are lost, because eventually, as you lose people who don't notice it, who don't pay attention, and so on and so forth, all of those people result in lost opportunities, and only a small fraction of them make it to a successful outcome. So, to the extent that we can use these techniques to understand better how the brain processes information, we can improve performance, and that's exactly what we're all about. The science of performance advertising. Thank you.